Okay, why don't we get started? Who was not here last week? Can I see hands? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Are you sure? 8. Okay. Well, that's part of the challenge of this, is because it's an elective, so many people end up registering for it to hold the space, and then those who want to get in have to get an override, and then so I still don't know. Is anybody here still in the deciding phase? It's totally okay, but it would be really helpful for me to know, just from a whole calibrating standpoint. Okay, so we'll figure out how many of us are. Is anybody not registered yet? Or wonders if you are registered yet? Okay. Okay, great. Well, as some of you know in close detail, having read it, today is one of those course sessions where we will have a reading that we can talk about, and there is a strange assignment in this course about a reading response. And I made those extra credit for this time just because so many of you are here for the first time. It's a pretty weird state of affairs. So we will have this conversation today about the Ian Bogost book to the best of our ability. And it's completely okay that many of you haven't read it at all. But what I want to do is look at this roster that I have and be able to look at who you are and to try to do something that is really hard for me, which is I'd love to be able to know each of you by name, both in what we do in here, but more importantly out in the world, because we will meet again, I suspect. So today I'm going to spend more time than typical, I think, in just methodically going through this frickin' roster and looking at each of you. And then either you will have a page range that you will have responded to, and we can look at the picture that you provided, and we could talk about that. Or you didn't, and what we're talking about is things today. Suchness, the nature of what things are and what a thing is. Or in Bogost's terms, I love this, if we take away people, units and operations, that there are first principles that we can talk about. And my argument, my contention is that if you want to work in terms of information architecture, then you have to be smart about these first principles of what things are and what is, and things that you may find to be pretty obtuse. The second part, so we will do that. We're just going to talk about this book for a while. Then we'll take a break. I know last time I tortured you all with a inhumane span of talking. Then we'll talk about human phenomenology. The reason that I assigned this book on alien phenomenology and the ability can we get beyond ourselves to examine some of the most basic assumptions about what things are and how we talk about stuff, is to then flip it and then talk about, well, but we are people. We do have this sense of being that is awfully human-centered, and that's good, right? Many of us want to think of ourselves as practitioners of human-centered design or people-centered processes. So alien phenomenology helping us to see more and better about human phenomenology. And then last but not least, and in the process of the first part, when we're talking about the book and I'm going through this roster, I'm going to give you a number. And I'm going to put you into one of 4 groups. And we have breakout rooms that we can use during the last hour of each of these classes when we need to. And today in group land, there is a figuring out of assigned roles. So when we break out into group time, each week there will be a couple of you whose job it is to lead the conversation. And this will all make sense a little bit later. And we have a grader now assigned to the course, Rohan, who is going to be you all got to work with Nick this week. Rohan from now on will be the grader. And so this strange thing, and I'll just explain it briefly from last week, about these reading responses What he is going to do each week is figure out how many pages there are in the most widely available version of the book. So for the Bachelard book, it would be the one with the gray cover that most of you probably got used. I hope you didn't spend too much on it. This is just an exercise to figure out approximately where in this book you should be focusing on for your response. There are certain themes in these books that are more obvious than others. And my fear is that if I don't assign you to a specific page range, we will all have quite similar responses to some of the more obvious themes in these books. And these things are so full of strange wonder that I want to get more out of it. And so I'm sending you in there into specific parts of it to dig around in it and then bring back something that you'd be interested in talking about. That's as complicated as this gets. It's you either do it or you don't, the assignment, and you get, not only did you get extra credit if you turned it in this week, but those of you who turned it in by, I wanted to say midnight Friday, because ideally I'm looking at how you've responded to these things before then coming in here to talk about it. That's another reason why this could be brilliant, or why it may be really dumb, or worse, stupid. So, so getting it in by a certain time also allows our stalwart grader to have more of a life and not be, is another one of those things going to come in from outer space? So if you do need to get it in late for any reason, you can still send it to him and he'll still do it, but there will be a little bit of a shading of your completion of that as an assignment as a result. But I'd really love to get you know, a picture and some words from you all each week as fodder for what we might talk about together. So does anybody have questions, especially you here for the first time folk? So you'll get an email, it'll have a table of everybody's unique name, the page range approximately that you've been assigned. And I know that if you have a Kindle or whatnot, mapping that to a page range is like hard, so it's not meant to be laser beam, it's meant to be a shotgun, and this will get you close enough, is my hope. And then at any point, you send this picture and this caption to Rahan, and then we all can start looking at them on Pinterest before class, even if you are so inclined. I certainly will. And then we'll accumulate this record of how we've responded to this stuff. And then rather than going through each week and drilling out each one of you as a subject of conversation, I might just be more opportunistic and pick the ones that I'm more curious about and not bother all of you every time. Because my sense is it's going to take a long time just to say, who are you, what's your name, did you have some sort of a response, and let's talk about it. So the lecture portion today may be pretty short. Does that make sense? Okay. So is anybody here previously familiar with Ian Bogost as a writer at The Atlantic or Smarty Pants about video games? He's often on NPR and PRI type shows as an expert talking about video games, electronic culture, and the like. He teaches at Georgia State, or Georgia Tech, I'm sorry, and I find him to be pretty interesting as a writer. And there are a lot of big things going on in this book. Did anybody read a Kindle version of this book? I did. Okay, so most of the rest of you who did got a physical copy. Okay, interesting. No? Oh, is it available free through the library? Oh, great. And does that free version have a way that you can track the pagination of the print one to the pagination of the digital one? Is it just like scans of a physical book or something? Awesome, okay. Well then, we can talk about any number of things. And the way that this starts out is with a 10-cent word that I'm awfully fond of, ontology. And this means different stuff in different domains. Are any of you from a life sciences or natural science background where ontologies and taxonomies are a thing, a word that gets bandied about? Just the examination, the science of what it means to exist, ontology. And so that is one of the ways that the book begins. And did any of you visit the Latour Litanizer that Bogos created as part of this book? It's on his website. You can get the slides. I'll post these slides tomorrow. This idea of things and what is a thing, and some tools and approaches for us to shake up and disrupt our ability to understand what things are through certain kinds of tools. And before reading this book, I threw around the word ontology a lot because, if you remember from last week, some of us think information architecture is about the structural integrity of meaning. So if we're about structures that are aligned with meaning, then we need to be proficient with the science of meaning. So ontology is something that I like, and I like this idea of flat ontologies where you just sort of put everything in a weird assembly with no hierarchical relationships other than the hierarchy of adjacency, and just sort of seeing what this does to your ability to discern things, or how will this disrupt your sense of what a thing is. And the word that Bogost used for this that I was not familiar with, and sort of the first tool from this book I think that he suggests is ontography, that the writing down of the way of explaining the world or things is an approach that will allow us to, at the very least, get closer, faster to the post-human future that's sort of the predicate for this book. So that's about as much setup as the first part of the book that I'm interested in doing. And so I'm just going to start going through this and looking at you and asking you what you think about what things are. Mallory Anderson? Hi.
Hi.
Did you have the occasion to read this fine book? Or some of it?
I read the first few pages.
Excellent.
A little extra.
Yes. And so in the first 4 pages, did you start to get weirded out or delighted, tickled a bit by the weird litanies, Latour litanies that he had of like chili peppers and tobacco pouches and cactuses, like the weird use of language? Did you get into much more than that setup?
Well, and I had to read beyond my, I mean, we should all read more than probably what is assigned to us, but just to get a handle of like what was even happening.
Yep.
I had to read more. Do we talk about our pictures or?
Sure, yeah, let's switch. So you made a picture, huh? Which one was you?
I was, it reminded me of just like how we put value on pictures, and it was the kids, pictures of kids and in their bedrooms.
Oh, yes.
Which I'm sure a lot of people have seen that, or like the family and like what their food is for a week. And just how,
where did that go?
You know, the same things are different things to different people.
Is it this one? Yeah.
I got from the first 3 pages.
Yeah, so these people, and this is a project. Do you remember who the artist is that does these? Oh, wrong screen.
I don't, and that would have been a thoughtful addition to my...
No, that's okay. That's okay. It's knowable. It's the person who does these wonderful books that are about assemblages, what people do and what people eat and in a place, and how looking at people's things helps you understand about people. Cool. Well, it's nice to, and Mallory, that's how you prefer to be addressed?
Mallory or Mal.
Okay. Great. Okay. Oh, iPhoto. This is going to be a, yeah. It's not optimal, I know. Okay, let's see. Oh gosh. I saw your face earlier. Your yeah, there you are. Can you pronounce your first name for me again?
Ashwarya.
Okay. Ashwarya. Say it again.
Ashwarya.
Ashwarya. Hello again. Ash? You know, if you give me the easy option, I will probably take it. Okay. Hello again. And reading, did you?
I went through the first 10 pages. That's all I did.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it was very hard a language for me to understand because some of the words were not very familiar with the kind of the second is, I love the idea. Once I started to get the hang of what he was talking about, I loved the idea of how he wants to treat everything equally and everyone equally, and how he compared the two Whitehead's concept and the concept which was from the door, and how he compared the two with object-oriented ontology. It was very interesting for me to see that contrast, and I never had ever thought that humans look at everything from the human perspective, and I hadn't given that much of a thought until I read the book. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting.
Thank you. And did you make an image?
Yes, it did. So because he was talking a lot about how equal everything should be, I took two frame of references of equality. That is, one is I took the hammer because he was talking about that in the book.
Yep.
And the hammer and a woman holding a hammer was a little more of something that I thought of as equality. So the caption was, I don't know.
Everything and everyone strive to be equal. We as humans perceive the whole world from our point of view, which is biased. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Vegeta? How do you prefer it to be pronounced?
Vegeta.
Okay. Hello. And reading?
Yeah, I read the pages after hers. So mine was mostly based about how, like, you know how everyone's come up with different theorems and everything, and it's all based on our perspective, like humans' perspective. And when we define nature, we define it only in terms of humans, and we never really separate nature from our perspective. And he gives the example of like how we compare, like, say, a mother bear or something like that, a bear, and we say it has, like, say, motherly characteristics because we only compare it to ourselves. So we don't have, like, a separation of different natures. We have only one single nature. And he talks about how things can erode if you remove the human factor out of it. But the thing is, it can survive without the human element in it, because each element is an element on its own. And yeah, I mean, so my picture was the peacock level.
Nice.
The left one is how we perceive it, and the right one is how certain animals perceive it. So when we look at a peacock, we think like, oh, it's really beautiful and everything. But from a different nature's perspective, say another animal, that's actually, a few birds are actually afraid of peacocks, because they look at this big purple thing and...
That's more death metal than pixie dust over there, yeah.
And a peacock with full, like, you know, like in its full glory is actually a really fearsome thing for like other creatures. But for us, it's really beautiful. So how can we assume everything about this? I mean, everything about this.
Does your way of seeing the world, your belief system, is that part of this?
Yeah, I mean, when I was reading about this, when I was looking at this picture especially, I was like, oh yeah, peacock is like so beautiful. I mean, that's just my nature of looking at things. But what he mostly emphasized, what we're never really living in the really real world, because we're just living in our world, and there's actually another world that we never would know, and we just assume everything because we're never in that world, we're living in our world. So we would never know how it is like to live in that really real world, which is, I thought was pretty fascinating, because we never know.
Yeah.
We never see another perspective.
But I heard you say earlier that your sense is that that world can get along just fine without the human...
That's what he assumes, because he's like, imagine a city and, you know, like the whole of human race was like wiped off the face of the earth, and you just start to think like, oh my god, like pipes would start bursting and subways would be flooded and steel would start eroding and stuff like that. But who knows? I mean, nature might take its course and they would still sustain, because why do we make everything about us? Why do we have physics theorems and everything based on our perspective on units of measurements and stuff like that? I mean, that's what I think. Like,
have any of you spent time in another culture more than just visiting? Stick them up a little bit higher. Did you find that the way that the culture you were visiting, that where it would put people and nature was calibrated a different way? Like how close or far we are as whatever we are to whatever all of the rest of it is? Did any of you as visitors to another culture think that that was a different calculation? Because the way that I read this is that your ability to even picture that world absent our perspective. How can there be things without our naming them and putting them in arrangements relative to each other? Your ability my ability to latch onto that, I think, is made even more difficult by how far my culture puts, how exceptional people are relative to the rest of everything else. So I'm curious, any of you travelers, is this sort of like other world, like really first principles-y stuff? Does that feel like other cultures have that calibrated a different way when you lived in them?
Not necessarily other cultures, I would say.
No?
To me, at least, it seems like the individual things. I know that this grandma that I met in Czech Republic, her house was extension of her. So the border between herself and the object that she was living in, the way she treated her house was just like she would treat herself. So I wouldn't really say it's a cultural thing.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'm curious to know about that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Nishan.
Yeah, right here.
Hi. Did you read the thing?
Yeah, I did. So, it was towards the end of the book.
Okay.
And what the author was talking about, how philosophers should be doing things, and they are not. Right? So the author wants philosophers who have been writing this really wordy descriptions, and they have this whole dream of a world which does not exist. And these are not the radicals, right? The radicals are the people who probably do what they should be doing, or they make these changes in the environment around them, but they aren't doing so. So he gave a few examples of certain people who are making things happen.
Did you make a picture response to this?
I did.
And what picture would that be?
Should be going down. Yeah, this one. The guy from
Stormtrooper?
Yeah.
Yes. So carpentry was the way that Bogos framed that making. And I think what he was saying was that philosophers don't make stuff enough, and that he had this idea of practical ontology, which to me is a lot of what information architecture is. You could call it practical ontology. But that philosophers, the people who frame this stuff for us, the people who give us the ways of seeing and talking about this, that they aren't making things, and that is part of why they are not saying it right or doing it right. Did that ring true? Is anybody in here a philosophy undergrad or had a minor in it before somebody talked you out of it? Philosophy background in academia?
About a year or so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
So that sense of philosophers being makers?
I've always thought it was a better way to go. I mean, I appreciate words and descriptions and subdivisions and divisions, but I think that people do tend to lose, like philosophers do tend to lose track of the real world around them. You know, there's something you can learn from getting your hands dirty, which I'm finding more and more like to become a philosophical type person anyway. So getting out there, getting my hands in the mud, sort of figuratively, like working on code or designing a website or something like that, reminds me that like, my ideas have to take practical form somehow.
Does anybody think or detect a contradiction in Bogost's first part relative to the second part here, though? I'm thinking especially in terms of flat ontologies, and even if you reduce it, you try to make it sort of antiseptic and just say, well, units and operations, whatever these things are, isn't the making of an essay, aren't the things in the little lecture that I cobbled together, this is all new to me, this phenomenology stuff, so it's going to be terrible. I'll set you up for this. But anyway, I made something, right? I didn't have that material before. I put it together, and the Bogostian sense of carpentry, to me, made it seem like if I was working on the physics engine for a game, that's somehow a makery that is putting me more in touch with my ability to get post-human and shit. But isn't planning making? Isn't the assembly of ideas? Yeah, you said get your hands dirty. I have a picture in my mind of Lou Kahn covered in chalk and his shirt all covered in charcoal. He wasn't making buildings. He was making ideas. And it seemed to me, or did anybody else feel a little bit of a clash between that carpentry exhortation and the, well, yeah, but just move, you know, in a way, I'm making as much as, I'm a bricklayer, so my bricks are ideas. Yes?
I didn't read any of this, but...
That's fine. It's probably better.
So the whole making things, and like the idea that you have to create like tangible objects, comes at sort of the cost of like all the caretaking work and the structure, like the support work that goes on, that goes like unaccounted for. So similar to you're saying, like I, you know, make notes or spreadsheet or plan, like all of that, like providing support and sort of, yeah, the support that society needs, and especially I think that there's an article about this written by a woman about how traditionally caretaking isn't considered valuable, and like the whole idea of they're emphasizing making and tangible, just like, yeah, puts that down even more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would love to talk with any of you who don't agree that there is a maker bias, or sort of a, it's the coolest way to be a UXer is to be a unicorn maker who goes to, you know, startup weekends and gets out the stickies and the string and the cardboard tubes, and like there's this sense of that's the real stuff. That's the real stuff. This is your wireframes and your drawings and stuff are because the real stuff needs to is going to happen later. Yes.
So my section was about the comic book guy from The Simpsons.
Okay, who are you?
Stephanie Eaton.
Eaton. Really, you may not be on my roster. E-A-T-O-N?
W-O-O-T.
Oh, it's because I'm deaf. Yes, there you are. Thank you. So yes, please continue.
The section was about comic book guy and elitism, and about this, about sort of the like ability to nitpick, but you don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
You just nitpick, which as a comic book fan I can appreciate.
Actually, in that episode, there was, yeah.
And also, as a former film studies major and then went into production, there's this weird space similar to this UX space, which is the film, people who make films don't see a point in film studies because you're just doing it because you can't make the films, so you're just studying it, right? You just want to teach it because you don't know how to make films.
Yeah.
And studies people think production people are dumb.
They're just hands.
Yeah, basically.
They're just a bunch of hands, and without us idea makers, they're just, yeah.
They're just, and I think it's really interesting. It doesn't make sense to me. The disconnect never made sense because I feel like in order to make, you have to understand what you're making, and in order to understand what you're making, you should try to make. So and so the elitism though I think exists on both sides, and I was trying to make that make sense with the earlier stuff in the book, which I tried to.
Did you make a picture response?
I did. It's a picture of USC. It's a building.
Oh yeah. So did you attend college at this place?
I attended grad school previously there. And I quoted the phrase that I heard all the time while studying it.
Those who can do, those who can't teach.
And that was sort of that was what they said to you all the time as a film studies person. And then, you know, I did finish film studies and then I went to production, and wow, I could do both. And it seemed to me it didn't make sense, this disconnect, and I was trying to make that make sense with, I confess I didn't read the whole book. I read my 3 pages and tried to read some of the earlier stuff. But like the importance of making and studying, and that's what I thought the book was trying to get at least from my 3 pages, was like this, maybe we should do.
Yeah, I've artificially trumped up the potential size of this inconsistency just for fun to talk about. Because really, if you take it back to what he's saying, which is we need techniques to help us get to this post-human way of relating to the units and operations that we all have to deal with. This is one of the ways that if you aren't yet a maker in the more given sense of that, then go get your hands literally dirty in sawdust or glue or something, because that will free you to get to these kinds of ways of seeing that are beyond the human first way of characterizing everything.
But I think it works the other way too, that if you're a maker, you should also understand what you're making. A little bit, at least. I'm not saying you all need to go get, like everybody needs to go get fancy philosophy degrees or anything like that. But
even
like,
to swallow a philosophy 101 class, that's as hard as asking some of us to write code. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to go back to alphabetical order. Joshua.
Yep.
Yeah, did you do a thing?
I did, actually. I read the whole book before the semester.
Oh my God. And did you have a picture?
I did. It's the man staring into a fish tank.
Oh, this one, yeah.
My assigned part of the book is when I mentioned the phrase, what is it going to be a thing? So I've got this guy here who's, standing with his arms up against an aquarium, wondering what it must be like to live as a fish. That's the message that stuck with me throughout, if you go and you talk about different, philosophers and like the cartoon thing, but what stuck with me was this basic principle of, trying to boil an object down into basic elements of what is it like to.
Do you think it's overly parsimonious? Does it feel like there's someday a practical assist to you in what you want to do in the world, to have this little irritant placed here by Mr. Bogos to say you realize that the thinging that you do and the object or the unit operations that you're involved with, that ain't the only way that that this can be expressed or understood. Is that helpful, do you think?
I think on some level, yes. And I think down the road, looking back at it, I think it will be helpful. I can tell you in the present, it was frustrating to read.
It's, yeah.
It just kind of felt like he wasn't really going anywhere. But there were times, that I'd mark and, like, oh, okay, it's starting to make sense.
Let's hold on to that. I'm going to fast forward to later in one of you who had toward the end in the wonder section, because that's part of the teaching on wonder, right, is the slowing down, the hesitating to have a speculation, to have this speculative way of understanding, but to not be hasty to speculate. Anybody from toward the end of the book in Wonderland? Yes, what's your name?
Mayank.
Is that your first name or your last name?
Yeah, first name.
What's your last name?
Hanna. K-H-A-N-N.
Okay. There you are. Hi. So yeah, wonder is the final meditation in this book that you have to wait and be watchful.
Yeah. So it was like everybody was. So I kind of submitted my survey at the end in the evening.
That's fine.
All I could get to know from people was, this is a horrible book, this is a horrible book. But then my readings were very simple compared to other people, I felt.
What did you make a picture response?
Yeah, it's a couple of gears which are working together.
Oh yeah, I like that one. Gears, where are
I think it's
you?
in the down. Yeah.
There we are, this one.
Yes. So all through the 3 pages which I had to read, it was all about how do you make a cake. And
Yes.
it's very interesting. It was like, I don't read cookery books, but then this was like a very vivid description of how things should be made. And there was so much focus on the details, like as to how much churning you should do and what kind of an impact it has. But then what I could get through the entire thing was that how all the individual parts need to work so well. So in the cake context, it said that the flour, the sugar, the eggs, they need to be beaten properly so that they get the perfect emulsion and hence the perfect rise when the cake bakes. So what I could get from it was like how individual parts of a machinery or anything in this ecosystem should be working together.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a powerful word, ecosystem. That there is a relatedness that may be happening here that goes beyond the human thinging and the way that we naturally look for patterns, the way that we tend to see hierarchies or what have you. That there is this flatter way that we could look at all these parts. Somebody might value one of these more than another because of their point of view, but there is a way that we can relate to things, and I think those of you who do front-end code like with CSS, there's that thing about where you have to reset it first. Like there are all these different browsers and platforms that where they start the first pixel is in a different spot maybe because of reasons. And so there's this laying it bare that you can do before you give it any rules, which is what if there are no relationships between anything? Can we strip it bare? And I think for any kind of design, let alone architectural work, to be able to take the environment, the ecosystem that you're working in, and to be able to speculate into it on the basis of, well, what if it was just flat? Those types of ways of seeing are not intuitive and not often valued, I don't think, in the sausage works of making digital products and services. To bring it back to first principles like this, I don't think is often welcome. And maybe we can start to talk about why that might be a problem. Yuan Chen? Y-U-A-N? Chen? Not here? Okay. Man, this got all lifeboaty in here. Boom! She's out. Abhishek Dewan? How did I do? How do you say your name?
Abhishek, but that's good enough.
Abhishek?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Did you read the thing?
Yeah, I had 3 pages essentially. What I got out of them was my 3 pages basically talked about how humans are evolving into this post-human condition where machines are merging with people.
and how that is inevitable, and you will sort of move into an age where people will have prosthetic arms and prosthetic legs and stuff like that. And keeping that in mind, the picture that I basically sent was a photo of the Matrix, basically. For me, which basically represented the ultimate merging of machines and man. I mean, that's how I think the future is going to be. It's going to be information. People are going to be living online, and that's the way machines will merge with people. And it's inevitable. I mean, you can say it's a bad thing. You can say it's a good thing. You can't run away from it because the world is going to do something like that. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I think there's a way of not needing to agree with that as an inevitability, where the rest of the discussion is still interesting. But I think it would be the most practical, the whole rest of it, if what you said is true, that this is an inevitability, and us being able to apply ways of putting together the world that are not human-centric, that do lend themselves more and better to units and operations and less to things and beings. Yeah. Do we want to grease the wheels that get us to here? Maybe not. Let's see. Noreen. Hi. Did you read the thing? Did you make a picture? This guy with the half face?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Living vicariously through media.
So my part was also on wonder, and the author talks about how elite white upper middle class loves watching shows about criminals and drug dealers.
The Wire, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The reason for this, he explains, being that as humans, we have an innate desire to experience a different life, and through these TV shows, we get that chance to live like a second human being in the span of 1 or 2 hours and vicariously experience that kind of life. Hence the picture, which depicts as like 2 sides to it, every human.
I just watched The Dark Knight was on TV this weekend, and that reminds me of Harvey. Let's see, Caitlin. Hi.
Hi.
Did you read?
Yep, and I did a picture.
Did you make a picture? Awesome.
Yeah. It's what I'm looking for. That right there with Mr. Muddle.
Aha.
Okay, so I had to read all of before and after just to understand a little bit of what was going on, get some context, because it's kind of hard to jump right in and read your 3 pages.
Yeah.
So I tried to read it a little bit before and after, and in the 3 pages that I covered, Bogo's he brought up these 2 notions. He brought up Latour's notion of, if I'm pronouncing this wrong, correct me, imbroglio.
Yes.
Imbroglio, and he also brought up John Law's concept of mess. And so I read these, and he kind of talked about this concept of the idea that like imbroglios are kind of this like network that's very formal, and he described it as a muddle with a monocle.
Yeah.
So that is Mr. Muddle. He's a character from the Mr. Men series. It's a book series, and there are all these different Misters and whatever. And this is Mr. Muddle. As you can see, his feet are backwards.
And he does have a monocle?
No, he doesn't have a monocle.
Okay, so you've added, okay.
I added the monocle because I
was going to say that's prescient or spooky or something.
Yeah, kind of spooky, but just the idea of like how this imbroglio is the concept of something that's like a muddle with a monocle. It's very intellectual, an intellectual problem. Then he talked about Law's concept of mess, which is something that it's not very elegant. It's not an intellectual project. He's also very pragmatic with the idea that he talked about how messes, they still want this imbroglio because it has some type of like, it provides like a common ground to somehow unite the massive mess. So that's what I kind of try to portray in this picture here.
Very nice. Yeah, a muddle with a monocle. Does anybody else have a way of, because that's metaphorism is another one of the moves from the Bogostian playbook of how you do this kind of thinking, and that is a peculiar metaphor. It's one of those, it's almost like a Latour litany packed into a little metaphor. But that idea, what is the monocle, what does the idea of monocle mean when added to muddle? How is that different than mess? What's the quality difference? Yeah.
My impression is it adds a kind of respectability to the mess.
It's an upper class.
Yeah.
Respectability, sophistication. Are monocles ever not an affectation? But even when they were a new thing, even like during the first wear of one of those, wasn't that kind of?
Probably.
Kind of spooky.
Wasn't it like for reading, right? Because you didn't want to wear glasses all the time, so if you needed to read something, you could whip out your monocle, and you could put it away, and it's just kind of accessory. But yeah.
So like a selective, that's an interesting, the physicality of that, right? Sort of the selective focus. There's this mess, so as opposed to mess, the muddle with the monocle is able to make something crisper or sharper out of a piece of it, but it isn't fixing it all. Yeah, I like that. I would love to, that would be an honest way to describe what we're making for people oftentimes, but we probably shouldn't say it like that. Sebastian, did you read the thing?
Yeah.
Did you make a picture?
Yeah, trucker hat.
Oh, very nice. And did you have to Photoshop that trucker hat to say that, or is there actually one of those?
There's a trucker hat generator.
Okay. Very nice. That is very nice.
I guess I could put it in Photoshop maybe. A little bit easier. My section was where he introduces the term unit and tries to talk about why he chose that term in place of thing or object or other possible things. And he has this thing where he just wants to choose a word or a phrase that's free of all these associations and baggage, just like the imbroglio one, the why he dismisses that one. So in this picture, it's actually kind of cheated a little bit. There's two pictures. There's the trucker hat, which he mentions a little bit before in my section, which is why it's there. But then this is also a picture of the planet Earth. Do you see that little speck? All right, this is a picture from the Voyager when it was far away.
There we
are. I don't know how far it is. Pretty far. So it's kind of pointing to his idea of units having this paradoxical nature where they're one thing, but then they also contain all these other things. And they have to exist separately from that. And so the trucker hat is a unit, the Earth is a unit, but then there's all these things beneath those things. Yeah, that was kind of the idea.
Well played. Very nice. Yes. Madeline? Madeline. Okay, hi.
Hi.
Did you read the thing? Did you make the picture? The... Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, so my section was building on Sebastian's with the unit and introducing the concept of the unit operation. And it reminded me of this like database method of cube roll up and drill down where like your database itself is a unit, but then any combination of entries can also be considered a unit. So it's what scale do we want to be looking at and how much do we want to drill down versus roll up.
In that world, is there something more granular than unit?
I
Building blocks.
Sorry, what does that mean? Like, go up and go down?
Yeah, so the idea is you can think of a cube of multi-dimensions. So maybe one is time, and one is location, and one is product sale or something. So then rolling up would be, let's take all of the time and just count, all the products we sold throughout time. So you're counting through all the entries in that row or column and merging them all together.
Is that a visual explanation for the way that relational databases work as a cube, as a spatial metaphor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Verena? I mean, Verena.
She's not in class anymore.
Okay. Sad to see her go. Anne. Man. Adjacency, they influenced each other. Michael. Hi. Did you read?
I did read.
Did you make a picture?
Yeah, mine is the little mummy pen.
Oh, yes.
Story. So this is when he was talking about kind of like a circular conception of ideas, like where when you scale out things, you can view things in different ways. Like, and in this case, that's a pen. In another case, it's a mummy. In another case, it's like a representation or a misrepresentation of culture. And then all of these things are equal to him. Like they don't have any sort of precedence over other things. But the object itself, it doesn't even capture what that object sees of me and the rest of the world. And that was always problematic to me as I was going through it, because he's talking about objects understanding each other, and I know it's kind of like his metaphor, but in a sense he's implying kind of a humanistic way of objects understanding each other, but also inviting us not to impose that on objects. It's a very circular argument that I had a problem with throughout the whole text.
Yeah. Yeah, and almost the sense that that our enacting it as readers is some sort of part of the scam. That there's some. I watched Fight Club the first time and didn't understand that it was all in the dude's head. Sorry for the spoiler. But like that, there's that kind of nested in a nest. The circularity of that gives me vertigo sometimes. It makes me think: is there like a boss tier to understanding what the hell this book is about that most of us will not have access to because of the circularity of the arguments? Did anybody get to the boss, the VIP? What's it like up there?
It was a bit on anthropocentrism and metaphorism, and he says that like there's this super objects that are kind of outside of everything else that people refer to, and that it's just as chaotic and bizarre and weird and like turned inward as everything else is. So it's like there's not really an objective authority. Like he talks about like ethics and things having their own kind of internal ethical rules, but that the ethics appeal to like some higher authority, but that higher authority is just as bad. So it doesn't really matter. So yeah, he's kind of belittling anthropocentrism and says it's really impossible to get away from it, but how important it is to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the object at the same time. Because that's just how we understand things, is because we're kind of limited in our ability to perceive outside of being a human being. Because that's all we know, but it kind of makes sense.
Kinda. Yes.
In their shoes, the object in your shoes.
Right. They don't have shoes either. Yeah.
It makes it even better.
They keep insisting, I have a 4-month-old son, they keep insisting he wears shoes so that he can learn how to walk. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
That's like saying I have a Ferrari so that because I'm going to learn how to be rich. Like it's not going to happen for a while. Yeah, okay. Nice. Let's see, Samarth. Hi. How do I say your name the right way? Samarth. Okay. Did you read the thing?
Yeah.
Did you make a picture?
Yeah, it was about a tree falling in the forest.
Ah, yes. There it is.
So he starts off, on page 31, he starts off thinking about speculation, and he throws out a few terms of speculative realism, onto theology, and some weird things, which I had to look up to understand them. So what my understanding of it was, he started speculating that are we observing the world in the wrong way? That the quotation I put is, if all you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you're just perceiving the world through our five senses, are we missing out on something? And if a tree does fall in the forest, does it make a sound? So it's kind of stitching it back to the thing like, maybe there's a lot going around, because it touches on the point that maybe aliens are connecting to us, and that SETI is looking at the wrong frequency or something. Maybe they're just, and he just throws out a term that aliens might be using Twitter or something, so there might be some signals coming, but our perception is in the totally wrong direction, and hence we're not able to perceive what we might be receiving as well.
And do you find that to be useful? That contention that he has about how we relate to things and the purported benefits of being able to change the way that we understand how they relate to each other and how we relate to them?
It kind of reminded me of the Simpsons powers of 10 kind of thing, that everything it might just turn out to be cyclically dependent on each other. So what happens is like the camera focuses out of Homer's head and zooms out till the point to see all the galaxies. And it turns out it's just if all the galaxies are just stand out from the Simpson's head.
Yeah.
So it's a cyclic relation with each other. so that's like, it might just turn out that everything, as in recent times, like Higgs boson and everything, which says that everything is just a wave and it's just the resonance at a particular position. So it might just turn out to be that everything, it does relate to each other, and things might also be communicated in a very metaphysical way.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. How about Niyati? Hi. Did you read the thing? Did you make a picture? Which one was it?
Mine would be that a lot of figures wording. Yeah, that.
This one right here?
There are like two different pieces. One is ending of first chapter and the starting of the second. So
Oh, you got lucky, it sounds like.
talking about two different things. One was like alien phenomenology, the term where it was going on defining the term. And the other was ontology. That I didn't get because he was just starting about it and the pages ended. So he was just giving random examples. So this was, he talks about like, building on what Samar said, the aliens, he was talking about the aliens, like how they might not be limited to creatures in person, they might be like everywhere, anything, and like he uses, they resides intermediately, so they are everywhere, and how as a philosopher that our job is to create that speculative realism, that they are out there, but no one knows what it is, and how they communicate. So he gives an example of a ROM chip or a microprocessor. You don't know how they communicate while you're using it, but like so something similar to aliens, how they're communicating, you don't know. So yeah, that's how it goes.
So you, I think you're the first victim of this methodology. I apologize. Anybody else land in the middle of a chapter break? Rohan, let's try to minimize in the future people landing in the middle of chapter breaks. Hadn't thought about that. Okay. Jai Wang? Ji?
She, aka Hayes.
Okay.
Yes. My picture is the dancing stack.
Okay.
By Andy Warhol.
The dancing. Oh, these guys.
Yes.
Nice.
So my session was about ontography, and based on the readings, my understanding of it is some graphic that's depicting the relationship between things to make sense of their relationship, right? But at the same time, if you scroll up a little bit of this picture, you can see at some point something fell off the picture. There are steps to the left of the picture, but you don't see it.
Yeah.
Right? So I feel like information professionals sometimes have to decide what we present to our client, to our users, and how to manipulate their perception of what we're talking about, and how do we decide what's going there, what gets left off.
I like it. And is this a critique of ontography's ability to be encompassing? That there's going to be steps that you're not going to capture with this technique of ontography?
Yes.
Yeah, well, the map not being the territory, if that's true, if this is a representation, then yeah, there's always going to be units and operations in an ontography that are not accounted for. Okay, very nice. Let's see, Prashant. Hi. Did you read the thing?
Yeah.
Did you make a picture?
Yes, I did.
Excellent. Oops. I don't know how to operate. You will soon, if you don't already know this. I don't.
It's a watch which is dismantled.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the yellow one.
This guy?
Yeah. So, like, I had pages after she is reading. So it talked about ontography basically, and like listing, cataloging, and the structure. He cites a few examples of like how whale shit, which is like ambergris, is. I mean, it's. He describes its structure very beautifully. I never thought like I would describe.
Yeah, the most beautiful description of whale shit imaginable.
Yeah.
It's great. Yep.
And like how precious it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he also talks about how listing isn't. Like, I mean, people assume listing is not an art, but it is an art. So basically, talked about structure, and like my picture was this because you don't really know what's inside of your watch. Things make clear, and my caption was to be or not to be. Like you don't really know what is there.
The unbearable thingness of being. Yeah. 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 How many things are here? Many and few. Has this explosion embedded some sort of what I love about the exploded view as a method is where do you choose to place the things? There's the built placement of the elements, and we say that's an object or a unit or a thing. But then the choices that are made in how to show the array of the contents is another set of hierarchies and hierarchies and relationships, or trying to not construe a relationship. Like the things up on the top, somebody wants us to think through this ontography that it doesn't belong to the things below. This to me looks like a human phenomenological approach to this depiction, right? Like this. An alien phenomenology would be, or I should ask it as a question, would an alien ontography be okay with just dumping them out? Is that a more Bogostian... Because there's also the sense of metaphor and meta-metaphor, and the punning and jokes that you can make with the ways that you are making a representation like this also. Good stuff. Samantha. Hi. Did you read the thing?
Yes.
Did you make a picture?
Mine is in the very bottom right. It's a picture of a Trader Joe's video.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so if you can scroll down just a little, it has a quote from the text there. So my section was an expansion on lists of art. And specifically at the very end, they say lists of objects without explication can do the philosophical work of drawing our attention toward them with greater attentiveness. So one of the examples given for this was an ad for Trader Joe's. And so if you think about how you would explain Trader Joe's to someone who's never been there, you'd probably start like super high level, like it's a grocery store, they've got some cool kind of unusual things, not too expensive. But what this video does instead is it just throws out random objects that exist in Trader Joe's that differentiate it from other stores. So salted peanut butter pretzels, or free coffee in an itty bitty little cup, or a bell at the checkout line. And it was kind of interesting to see how, rather than going with the really top level description that I think we'd give naturally, instead just listing out a series of defining objects. Actually, you get a lot more excited watching this video about it, and he says this helps you appreciate the essence of something a little bit more.
I love this, and it reminds me of, who was it? There is a phenomenological school in architecture in the built environment, and I believe it was Jean Labattu, I love pronouncing those names, who said that, it was either him or Charles Moore, who was a student of his, that architecture is about directing the attention of people. That the way that we're going to make this structure is about directing the attention, because anything that this structure is ever going to deliver is going to deliver through the sensing system of people. And what is the tip of the spear of our sensing system? It's attention. And so, yeah, this weird collage technique, you pay more and better attention to this than a beautifully produced, slick video that has a real logical unfolding of a value proposition. I think you could make that argument. Yeah. I haven't watched the video yet. Is this something that they put out?
No, it's completely unofficial. Some guy decided he was going to.
Yeah, they don't do ads officially. Like
that, and even that's interesting. Wow, that's great. Yeah, lists without explication. So often when we are making lists, we are using them as a form of explication. And yeah, those Latour litanies, I find them really delightful. I can see how many people would not. Alicia, you here? Hi. Did you read the thing?
I read my part of the thing.
Okay, and did you make a picture?
I did. I have the page about, I don't know, I'm not going to say his name right, Blanciac in his sketches.
Hey.
With the optician building, it was a giant org chart. It's the MC Escher Mickey Mouse.
Yep.
And a lot of what I read didn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yes.
But that, with kind of the conversation about juxtaposing different, totally random things together, that's how I felt. The Mickey Mouse MC Escher.
Very nice. Well, that's. I suspect that is in line with the author's intent, that you would have that discomfort. Selwyn. And do you prefer Selwyn? I see you have Jacob's listed here too.
Yeah, Selwyn's fine.
Okay. Hi. Did you read the thing?
Yeah, I read my 2 pages.
Did you? Awesome. And did you make a picture?
Yeah, I did. It's a pedal board, guitar pedals. Scroll up. Yeah, that's one. To the left.
Oh, these guys. Yes.
Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah.
So from my readings, one of the key takeaways is when you're making a catalog, like when list of objects, one can observe a very fine distinction between the perspectives of a letter of litany's view and that of Shore's view on ontography. So according to the letter of litany, you bring together a variety of different objects that once they're there, they kind of form relationships or convey some kind of a meaning. But on the other hand, according to Shore's ontography, he takes things that have been already gathered and kind of blows them into separate tiny things and nothing is reduced with no priorities, and each of them are just suspended over there. And he takes the example of an outdoor dining table at McDonald's in Florida, which has a picture of a hamburger and fries and some iced milk. And he says that it's not about the relationship between a person and his hunger, or between McDonald's and their customers, or some sort of relationship, but he just sees them as different separate things, as fries and pickles on the patty in the hamburger and stuff like that. So this picture kind of it lets you view it in both the perspectives, and then it's a collection of a catalog of different things that once they're together, it tells you something about the guitarist. It conveys the meaning about the kind of music that.
Do you play electric guitar? Yeah. So you can read this differently than we are able to read this. Yeah.
And even the position of different metal pedals at different places could mean different things about the kind of setup that a guitarist prefers.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, it's both kinds of ways of gathering if you choose to see it that way. Very nice. I'm fearing that this is going to take forever, so did anybody do a response that they really want to talk about? Because I could relieve us of this. I've looked at all the pictures. I'm going to continue to look at them, and those of you who did readings and made pictures, that was great. And this little experiment here both gives me a sense of the pace of how to use this, which is probably too slow for you all to enjoy as much as I did today. But I really liked how this turned out, so congratulations to all of us. Why don't we take a 10-minute break and come back when the big hand is on the 7 on our analog clocks on the back there. And then I will talk with you. I will do a kind of a lecture, but it's really half-baked at this point. And then at around 3, we'll break at around 3, and then at 3:10 I will show you rooms to go to get into your groups. And before our next break, I'll also put you in groups. So go away for 10 minutes and then come back. And I'm hesitant to interrupt it, but we're here to do what I want, and I thought this was what I wanted to do. What I am most fascinated by in this strange raising of questions about what things are is that I have to work with things all the time. And you all will have to work with things all the time. The unexamined base assumptions of the place where you are working in and the place that you're coming from. I was never given in my training a specific way, let alone a specific request to be asking that question. What are the fundamental assumptions of the place that you are coming from as a person? And then what are the fundamental assumptions about the world where the work that you're doing lives? And then having the reconciling of those things, or the decision to not worry about reconciling those things, be explicit. And I think that most of the trouble that I've gotten myself and my clients into over the years, I've been paid to make digital products and services for almost 20 years now. I think most of the problems could be rooted down into a mismatch between the basic assumptions of the world, the fundamental beliefs about even what comes down to what is a thing. Fundamental first principles, establishing those, having a way to talk about those and making them clear as a pretext to doing the things. Most of the disasters I've been a part of, party to, co-responsible for, we didn't do enough asking of that question of what do we mean? We went right from, and those of you who were here for the lecture last week, I talked about a moment of seduction of we know what we want now, hallelujah, let's start making stuff. And there's this middle part that I propose that you could put in between having an intention to do stuff and the doing of stuff, which is to wrestle with what things mean. And I am a big fan of Alan Watts, who is dead. He was a philosopher who was working in mostly for a North American audience in the 60s and 70s to try to reconcile, explain differences in culture and philosophy. And he's known as, or his foundation likes to describe him as one of the most unrutted philosophers who whoever called themselves that. And so when he talks about anything, he is often starting with a conversation about first principles. And in the 60s in North America, the exotic appeal of Eastern religion, Eastern philosophy, that we wouldn't have to use these tired names and concepts of Western religion and philosophy that we are tired of. He was an exciting teacher because he brought these ideas from, oftentimes from the other side of the world, from India and China was where he was, and Japan was where he was focused on where these things came from. And so I'm curious, are there any native Sanskrit speakers here, or anybody who knows Sanskrit? Okay, that's fine. This word in Sanskrit, at least as told to me by Alan Watts, it could be wrong, is a word for suchness. That in the language places, the cultures where Sanskrit was the language, that there is this concept of suchness, a way of describing and encompassing everything. That there are 10,000 things, which in an ancient world, to say 10,000 things is saying a lot. 10,000 things, or maybe to make it more contemporary, 10 trillion things, but one suchness. That there's a way of engaging with the world that is on the basis of asking the question, what is a thing? Asking the question, what is the most basic assumption about the way that the world works? And I find that a lot of the philosophical ravings of these crazy people are relevant to building and to making structures, and specifically to architecture and dwelling. And so I have a few thoughts, a few ideas, a few pictures to just sort of throw at you, having softened you up a bit with this strange book from Ian Bogost, to think about things and suchness and how that is operative, how that is meaningful to the kinds of work that you want to do when you leave here. I assume, who wants to stay, who after this degree is going to get another one? Couple of us? So a lot of us are not planning to stay. So how would this be? Philosophy, you could argue, is relevant to learning and higher ed, but how is this going to be practical to anything that we do? There is a philosopher who is hard to deal with for a lot of reasons, not only for difficulty in concepts and denseness of language, but because this person was involved with Nazism in the 40s and 50s, and it's Martin Heidegger. Has anybody done a philosophy class where Heidegger was part of? We've got one hand, okay. This is a picture of Heidegger's hut, and for Heidegger, the idea of things, it depends on dwelling. That all of the things in the world that we relate to, that the secret to understanding and making sense of that is caught up in the nature of how people are. And his argument, which I can't yet reproduce pieces of it, at some point I might be able to, but this is all really new to me. I prefer to teach what I don't know to what I do know. So I don't know of any of this stuff, but from what I've gathered, this is all about the propensity of people, that what is true about people is that we dwell, that there is a activity of humans that is just true of all of us, that we have a propensity, a humanity that is bound up in the question of what it means to dwell. And that makes buildings and structures relevant to the most basic principles and most basic understanding of how people are. That it's through structures and things that we figure that out. And so I'm going to read to you a passage from Martin Heidegger talking about things and how dwelling sets us up for an appreciation of things. He asks us to, he says, let us think for a while of a farmhouse in the Black Forest, which was built some 200 years ago by the dwelling of peasants. Here, the self-sufficiency of the power to let earth and heaven, divinities and mortals, enter into simple oneness and into things, ordered the house. So he's saying that the way that this structure came to be a thing, the reasons why this house is the way that it is because it's based on a sense of bringing together what he calls the four divinities, I think, or the four somethings, which are earth and heaven, the divinities or the unknown, and then us. That this is an explanation for how the whole world comes together, can be reverse engineered out of the way that this hut is put together. Here, the self-sufficiency of the power to let earth and heaven, divinities and mortals, enter into simple oneness, into things, ordered the house. It placed the farm on the wind-sheltered mountain slope looking south, among the mountains close to the spring. It gave the wide overhanging shingle roof, whose proper slope bears up under the burden of snow, and which, reaching deep down, shields the chambers against the storms of the long winter nights. It did not forget the altar corner behind the community table. It made room for it in its chamber. It made room in its chamber for the hallowed places of the child bed and the tree of the dead, for that is what they call a coffin there, the Totenbaum. And in this way, it was designed for the different generations under one roof. And in this way, it designed for the different generations under one roof the character of their journey through time. A craft which, itself sprung from dwelling, still uses its tools and frames as things, built the farmhouse. So everything about the way that it's good for people to be in relation with the environment is encoded in the way that this structure came together. And everything from the bed where children are born, to the place where you would worship whatever the divinities are, to the bringing in of a coffin, is all understood inside of this space. The whole scope of what it means to be, being, and things are all ordered in this universe of the hut. And this is an idealized example of the way that bringing order to things through structure can create a world. And as a counterpoint, this may cause a little bit of whiplash. I apologize in advance. Stanley Kubrick had another way of describing the way that things relate to people. Anybody here seen the movie 2001? Some of us have? Okay, well, I've never stayed awake through that whole movie, and but this part, I think I finally understand the monkeys part, and I would like to show you that now for those of you who've not seen it. Let's see. Oh no, come on, play the movie. Oh wait, oh, that's right, I didn't embed the movie because I don't have the permission to do that from the copyright owner. So somebody who's breaking the copyright on YouTube will provide the occasion. Okay, here we go. Oh shit. Oh man, okay, hang on. Technology is such a lie, isn't it? Displays, let's go back to mirroring. Yes, okay. So yes, the dawn of man as depicted by Stanley Kubrick in his film 2001. So previous to this, the monkeys were sleeping in a cave. And now the sun is out and they're waking up. Needless to say, this is the first time they've seen this object. This was not there yesterday. Okay. This is the same band of animals that had the encounter with the monolith. There's another band of animals that they've clashed with earlier that you didn't see. And that, kids, is how you get spaceships. Would anybody like to explain what the hell that was? Why was that the dawn of man?
I think it stems from Kubrick's rather cynical view of humanity. I don't know what the Outlaws exactly did, but it imbued them with some ability to realize, oh, we can hurt each other, or we can hurt things with things. Like,
this is the beginning of things.
yeah, they become more formidable because they have a tool with which to destroy other things.
Well, not only that, but it's the introduction of the idea that they could ever be separate from one another or from their environment. That's why this is the dawn of man, and this is the ability. So what I didn't show you, because it's a long-ass movie, is these tribes have been in strife, and they've been able to work it out in ways that stop short of ruining each other, just total destruction. Their ability to explain how they relate to the world from looking at, because they've seen bones before, you know, they've killed animals and eaten animals before. So that's not what this isn't about. This isn't the discovery of a tool to kill animals. This is the discovery of the idea that there might be things, and that there are more preferable ways to use things than the way that they're given in the natural environment. And this, and that's where, and so this was a supercut, and what I didn't show you is them slaughtering one of the competing tribe members with the tool, and then it ends with throwing the tool up in the air, and then it becomes the spaceship. So the ability to get so out of order with the way that we relate to each other and environment all has this extraterrestrial basis of somebody brought something into the environment that changed, that created the ability for there to be things. Every other relationship would be explainable to those creatures on the basis of family and relatedness and food and all these other things. So the beginning of things and how our ability to know what they are and to have a Heidegger's hut is answering the same problem. How do we relate to things? Well, he has this notion of because of something in us, we are dwellers, he says. It's just part of who we are. And that maybe part of dwelling is reconciling ourselves to seeing what we can't have ever unseen once we've seen it, which is that you can make distinctions between things, or that distinctions can be made, that your ability to relate to objects, for your ability to be unit and for there to be operations, is part of this thing that is painful. Heidegger says to dwell, to be set at peace, means to remain at peace within the free sphere that safeguards each thing in its nature. Dwelling itself is always a staying with things. So our inability, except for in extreme cases, to not recognize the otherness of things is this primal wound, this fundamental thing about people that we just have to reconcile through figuring out how do we relate to things. And working as an information architect with the pieces of a world, understanding how the world was made, how its thinging goes about, what are the units that operate. All of this is really close to the problems of dwelling. Elsewhere, Heidegger says, to say that mortals are, so just to talk about the being of people, is to say that in dwelling, they persist through spaces by virtue of their stay among things and locations. And we'll talk about locations later. Let's stick with things for the minute. So the thinging of the world, I don't know if you can read this or not, but the broken, so how does this matter at all? I can draw a direct line from the monkeys and the monolith to this. The monkeys felt free to kill one another because things are separated. And we can separate form from presentation. We can separate news story from container. And Bibiana is a friend of mine. I don't think that this is a content strategy fail as she identifies it. This is from the CNN mobile app, this screenshot. I think this is an information architecture problem, or maybe even an ontology problem, because you might like. What does that mean? What does liking, what is liking? If this was, some designer drew a bunch of rectangles to represent this at one point, before it became a made product, and I love it that the monolith is what? What is it? What is the thing that doesn't exist in nature? What is the thing that lets you know that people, of all beings that we're aware of, what do we make? We make fucking rectangles to tame the scariness of how we relate to the world. I could just put it in a box. I could just not care about what the story is. It's funny because it's true, right? Like, I'm going to make a box called Headline, and you know about my, I was speculating earlier, instead of you might like, this is probably more correctly, you want to see. The lurid way that this link baity, the pornography of what humans do to people is something that you seek out. You probably want to see. But certainly this is not you may like, because it's impossible to like the idea of a child being torn to pieces by its companion animal. That is, so what are things? Can we just make a rectangle and not... I think thinging is the real where all the action is, actually, in this kind of work. Thinging is, to the Judeo-Christian point of view, fundamental to what people are about. Naming the animals. What are all the names of the things? We had a place, according to one version of the story, which was the naming of the things, but what we didn't have... what did the serpent promise Eve? It wasn't that she'd live forever. It was that she would know what is good and bad. What's a more preferable way to arrange your relationship to things? There's a given relationship to things. You could stay on the rails. That's pretty boring, but hey, with this object, with this thing, you could change that to be a more preferable ordering of people and things. And supposedly that's how they got into trouble. You can arrange things, we talked about briefly last week, that the way that things are arranged changes what they mean. And this is involved in thinging. The arrangements that you can propose presuppose that which is to be arranged, which are things, or at the very least are units that have operations. Yeah, in the Bible, it starts out, how does creation work? It works on the basis of thinging, of separating this is from that. Either you lack a place, which is light, so that's the first thing that was created. And then you either have a place or you don't, so the things that lack a place, those are made next, heaven, sea, earth. And then you either have a definite place or you don't, planets that lack local motion. Or you have local motion, so next the things that lack life are made, sun, moon, and stars, etc., etc. That the thinging, what are the things? What are the first principles? What are the basic cultural understandings of how you separate things from other things is really powerful. I like the story that Alan Watts tells about where this all came from. It wasn't aliens dropping a rectangle on us and then watch it go. As far as Alan Watts is concerned, maybe this was a fisherman throwing the net and throwing the net and throwing the net like he did every day, and then realizing in a moment during the throwing of the net that he could see the horizon through the net holes. and that instead of that tree that is good for food being in that over there, it's actually 4 net holes up and 16 across. That the thinging, the breaking of the world into coordinates, sort of the Cartesian way of putting a grid on stuff, that's probably as old as technologies that would be able to separate, again, divisions. How do you make a world? It's by dividing it up. The world changes when you look at it through a grid. And I was having a conversation not too long ago with somebody who was writing a story about culture and wanted to know what is culture, what I thought culture was, and that was a weird conversation. And one of the things I brought up was, well, maybe it's the size of the net holes. It's the shape of, if this is the way that things are made, by putting, this is my culture's grid, it has holes that are a certain size. There are ways of thinking, there are ordering principles, there are approaches that lend themselves well to the most basic assumption of my culture about how it carves up the world. Because I'm from the diamond-shaped, organically different at times net world. And then somebody else is from a perfect mesh kind of a world. And the things that I thing from my amorphous set of net holes, they don't work here. This is a more orderly net. This is a more, would we say, this is a more advanced culture. What is this matrix of what allows things to be understood as distinct from each other? Well, maybe that's culture. That allows us to do the thinging. Watts makes this contention about the thinging, and he is a strong proponent of travel and of getting you into some other place whose basic cultural assumptions are as different from yours as humanly possible, that is something you ought to seek out and do for yourself so that you can be a more adept sensor of the thinging and be more in command of understanding how to do stuff, because only through seeing somebody else's perfect net holes would you be able to know that yours were a more sort of blobby and weird. And he says, you know, the difference between the West and the East is in the West, a child could very well ask this question: how was I made? The thinging of Watts' contention is that for Western people, the thinging of our world is based on the avant-garde philosophy of the 16th and 17th century. Cartesian coordinates, mechanized, that reality is objective, it doesn't care about anything, or if it does, it's blind lust that's driving all of it. And that these are mechanisms. And that we, with our science, we measure the world with our grids as machines. And you know, if you need your gallbladder taken out, it's just like Legos. It's just parts in machines, and we have specialists who specialize in the parts. And he contends that in the East, that question would be unthinkable, and that it would be natural for a child in the East to say, how did I grow? But that it wouldn't be that the thinging of the world from the innocent position of a child especially, who is just reflecting back how it got a sense of how this all works. So I'm curious to know, any of you who grew up in the East, does that seem plausible that culturally you would be proceeding from a how did I grow standpoint more so than a how was I made standpoint? I was raised in West Michigan in a very Christian background, and we have this sense of being made like out of clay and stuff. So how did I grow? That isn't my set of net holes. Anyone? Okay, well, he was talking in the 60s and 70s. Maybe global culture now is different. Maybe there's, go ahead.
I can see, so I'm from Japan,
Okay.
so I think that will be East. I think with this sense of question. I can see the I is a continuous self, and how I come to be might depend on the environment that I'm in, or like the different contexts that I lived through. So I would be curious to know what sense of I that one ought to have when asking how was I made. Is it consistent? Is it never changing? How does that play?
Great question. So it depends on how you make an I. Watts had a pretty harsh critique for the West and called its sense of what you mean when you say I, he referred to that as a hallucination. That it was a construct of separateness from everything, and that we can learn from cultures like those in the East that the self is continuous, and it's just where the whole universe is centered for one point of view. That's you. You're the whole environment as far as he was concerned. How about people from the West here? Do you have more of a sense of belonging to how I was made relative to how did I grow? Any stronger one way or the other? Okay. Yeah?
I don't specifically remember when I was a child asking. However, it makes sense because we have this idea of the stork and delivering, and I can't even imagine being a child now when things are delivered by Amazon,
Stork drone.
We ordered you from Amazon, how else?
Mm-hmm.
And so things are delivered and they have to be made somewhere.
Yep.
Instead of the idea of growing.
Yeah. Well, I think the larger point that he's trying to make with that contention is that if that's true, or if that was true at the time, that these other different cultures positioned on different parts of the planet, that their thinking is proceeding from a different place, and that the way that they relate to the world is completely dependent on that. And maybe with globalism, the sharpness of those distinctions is maybe being lost. I don't know. So one other little note here from Martin Heidegger. What is a thing? And the sense that I will leave you with before we number off and then go into groups and stuff is think of a thing as a gathering. Does that help with the sensibility of thinging and what use you might be able to make of things? That things are gatherings of other things. Or an assembly, that is a thing. He talks about, and I'll read one more passage, he talks about how a thing like a bridge, it's not really a dwelling, but its thingness is related to dwelling and how people are. And for him, the bridge is gathering all manner of aspects of the environment around it. So he says, gathering or assembly by an ancient word of our language is called a thing. The bridge is a thing, and indeed, it is such as the gathering of the fourfold which we have described. To be sure, people think of the bridge as primarily and really merely a bridge. After that, and occasionally, it might possibly express much else besides. And as such an expression, it would then become a symbol. For instance, a symbol of those things we mentioned before. But the bridge, if it is a true bridge, is never first of all a mere bridge, and then afterward a symbol. And just as little is the bridge in the first place exclusively a symbol, in the sense that it expresses something that, strictly speaking, does not belong to it. If we take the bridge strictly as such, it never appears as an expression. The bridge is a thing, and only that. Only, as this thing, it gathers the fourfold. So it is making sense of the shore, the banks, the water, the way that people relate to all of those systems. The bridge is not an object that is merely located by its Cartesian coordinates on the planet. That things are active. Maybe that's another fun takeaway from this Heideggerian sense of what things are, this is an active verb. Things are gathering. That's how we can know one thing from another, is on the basis of what it gathers. Things are wrapped up, is maybe another way to think of it. A thing could have a bow on it, perhaps. And non-things, like the enjoyment of a summer day, that gets a little tricky, right? Because I can think of this also as a kind of gathering. We could thing this scene by describing it in terms of what it's gathering. So that's maybe an unhelpful set of analogies. So when we work on information systems, they are always existing in a culture, in a way of thinging, in a way of describing and discerning what is what. That is something that I think we would benefit from being sensitive to in terms of culture. Think about what you make and the effect that it can have on its environment. Putting the wrong thing in this environment caused chaos. And when we make things and put them into environments, I have a friend who is an engineer who is an American Institute of Architects licensed architect, but he works as an engineer. Started a company that does structural engineering as a service to architects. And he gave a talk at World IA Day last year, and he said, I don't really understand what you guys do with this information architecture stuff, but if you are like architecture in the built environment, one of the ways that you would know that you're getting closer to what architects do in the built environment is being accountable for the effects of what you make. The reason that when people started calling themselves information architect, Richard Saul Wurman got a call from the AIA chapter in Texas somewhere when he first started talking about himself as an information architect and saying, well, you can't call yourself that in that sense, even though he was a registered architect in Philadelphia. For him to say information architect, and today that is a regulated word in many international locations where information architects want to practice, that word architect means, if you take it all the way back to the Code of Hammurabi, in the Code of Hammurabi is a little note about architects, and if the structure you designed, not just that you built, but the structure you designed, if it falls down and kills somebody's son, they can come kill your son. Us making structure, something as innocuous as a list, something as seemingly tactical and just for today, fix the navigation in the subsection of the FAQs. Make a new structure. This may be a little bit of aggrandizing, but introducing structure into the environment, things that are not attuned to the culture that you're dropping them into, that can be disastrous. And I think if we are working on places made of information, if we are to be taken seriously as architects, then talking about the consequences of structure that is introduced into the environment is something we need to talk about. I like Brian Eno a lot. Maybe another way of talking about this stuff is framing. Thinging could be synonymous with framing. How do you make a thing? Well, that is how you make a world. The system that you make frames from is making a world. The system by which, I don't know if you can read that, I think it says curved yellow fruit. This has really mundane application as well as profound application. What is a thing? What does it gather? This is the attributes gathering the actuals or something. This is sort of backwards to how we would be thinging, but this is structure that exists in an environment. How did this come to be? If we could figure out how the thinging here got so adrift from where we expected it to be, maybe we would know more about the culture of this company. Anybody use Pantone as a color system? This is, talk about an applied ontology. Bogost asking, when do you get to apply ontology? Having a thing can be really powerful when you then establish that in a way that's clear to everybody. So the thing of Rococo Red, how do you make your things retain their thingness across contexts? If you're a brand and you want to make sure that the badges and the smocks and the signage and the carpeting, all of the branded materials that use your special color, if we control what we mean by a thing really systematically, like Pantone does, then you can have your things be reliably things anywhere they appear. And that's part of the value that we can bring as information architects and information designers is thinging in ways that are really, really durable and clear when they need to be. We need the color to be understood this particular way across all these different color spaces and technologies. Well, we can help them do that. Yeah. Instead of jumping from intent to structure, taking it through meaning. I'm not sure what I was going to do with the rest of this. Like I said, this is pretty half-baked. Okay, I'll show you one more thing. Two more things. First thing, from Jason Hobbs in South Africa. This is a presentation that he gave at the IA Summit last year. Things get really interesting when you start putting them next to each other. And that's the next, so I think our next class we talk about dwelling. We will talk about the putting of things next to each other and how they mean differently when you array them differently next to each other. These are, the thing is circle, but by arranging the things, we can start to do all sorts of interesting stuff with meaning. And then the last thing about things. Oh shit, I'm doing it again, all right. Oh, how come that didn't show? That wasn't showing, was it? Oh, there we go.
Radio. Yep. Happy.
Why are they so happy? How does that relate to what we're talking about today? Does anybody want to get vulnerable? You're welcome to. Somebody's got to.
We were talking about what it is to put a thing in an environment and how it affects the environment. So it seems to me that they found this radio and they found out kind of what it did, but the sounds that it was making didn't make sense to them, like in the environment that they were used to, until they found the radio station that apparently was like something else they heard before, and then they enjoyed it. You know, they were like kind of on board with some of the other stuff, but kind of not, and they found the one that apparently is like their own cultural music, and suddenly they're good.
Yes. Yeah, so the sound they seemed to like was static. And they started calling it a radio before they had they weren't in its immediate environment yet. They were outside the window looking at it. They had a book that allowed them to identify it as radio. But then something about the actual being with the thing, right? There's this whole, the terror of how do we relate to things? And the happy when the way that we relate to things is by the book. It's how we expected, it was clear. And how wonderful that is for these aliens to know that it was correct, that it was all lining up. And the terror of those moments when, nope, it's not a radio, like, this is wrong. I think that speaks prosaically into what it is that something that we can do with information architecture and with design is to make the complex clear, to make what it says line up with what it is, to help expectations meet experiences. You have to dig into what things are in order to do that. So this may be the only classroom in North America where Stanley Kubrick and Sesame Street are adjacent. Okay, so let's see. I have some room numbers set up here. And I'm going to number you all off 1 through 4. And you need to remember what number you have. And then when we come back, you need to go to the corresponding place. And what's a little bit wacky here is what I would like for you to do, and I'll come visit each of your groups and we'll do this. I have a spreadsheet set up, and it's linked from the class website. And we want to pretty quickly figure out who is the leader of the group time for the next couple of sessions. And it really, if there's one of those activities that seems like you'd like to do it, you can try to sign up for it and argue for it. But really, it's just sort of a dump yourself into a slot where you could be leading what's going on. And I can show you, I should probably show you those. So this spreadsheet is now linked from the website. It is a Google Doc. You should all have the ability to, oh wait, I think it's maybe the next one. The ability to edit this. I thought for sure I linked it to the thing. Oh yes, it's in assignments, thank you. So group management, link to group management spreadsheet, thank you. So this is the list of things. What's the topic? So next week, and the other thing that's going to happen in these groups is I want you to pick which architect you want to focus on. And I'm okay with you picking that there being overlaps. I think it would be better if we had 4 separate ones, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to visit each of you in a way where you could do the picking and I could make who hasn't picked yet aware of what's already been picked. So, but I would love it for today for you to be able to pick which architect you'd like to focus on. The list of those is given on the class website, and then figure out who wants to lead each of these. So next week, the discussion, and I will provide discussion questions. So usually this is just you facilitating an exercise that I will have designed. And next week is to talk about residential dwellings, houses that this architect either did or didn't do. And the 3 or 4 of you who are meant to lead this, between yourselves, you can figure out, we're going to do a little bit of research this week and figure out, bring something back to the group next week. Pictures of residences, the story of why they never did a residential commission. Like, I don't know if Albert Kahn did any houses, and such like. So I'll put you in these groups. Your group can decide who you want to focus on. If there's multiple groups focusing on the same people, that's okay. And I think the really tricky one here is the building visit. Each of the architects who are on the list have structures that are visitable within a reasonable distance to campus, but like Cret, who did the DIA, your team would have to decide that you would be willing to all drive to Detroit on the 9th. So we're not going to have class at all on the 9th. We're going to use that time to get ourselves to go to buildings, and I'm going to see if I can visit you while you're visiting buildings through some miracle of transportation kung fu. But in any case, I think that's the tricky part is if you pick an architect like Cret or Yamasaki, whose work is not on the public transit lines here in Ann Arbor, can you make good on that? Because I want the majority of your group to have firsthand experience with with some built work of this environment, of this architect. With Charles Moore, he only designed the tower on North Campus. That's the only structure, but you could all go check that thing out. So, so that's my intention, is to number you off, depending on your number, have you show up in your room, and one of the rooms is this room, and then have your group decide among those architects which one you might want to focus on. And then you can go in and edit the tab of the sheet. Each of the tabs for the groups says architect name right now, and if you pick yours, you could put that in. And then I will come visit each of you to make sure that you've made a selection and that you've either forced yourselves into the slots in the spreadsheet. If you don't have this led by figured out, that you have a covenant among yourselves that you will figure it out over email and stuff. So what I want before we all leave today is all of your names into here, all of you in a group, and groups having picked an architect. Does that make sense? Can we do that in 25 minutes?
If we don't go to other rooms.
What's that?
Would it be possible just to stay here for today?
Yes, if you don't want to visit would it be better to just have you number off and then huddle in corners?
Would it be faster?
Yeah, definitely be faster. Good idea. Want to do that?
Yes.
That way we could have a live auction for who's picking what architect, and then somebody say, hey, we just got Albert Kahn. Great. Okay, so why don't we start in the very back and say your number.
1, 2, 3, 4.
1,
2, 3, 4.
1, 2,
3,
4. 1, 2, 3,
4. 1,
2, 3,
4.
1, 2,
3, 4.
1, 2, 3,
4.
1.
3, 4, 1,
2.
Okay, great. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2.